Well, joining us unusually in the studio, we have a guest. Labour's Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, has joined us. Mr Jones, thank you very much for coming in to see us here at BBC News. We've been hearing from the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, today, who has promised that there will be no additional tax rises, that everything that you propose is going to be fully funded, no ifs, no buts. How then are you going to balance the books? Because we are told by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, an independent think tank, that there's a dark cloud hanging over public finances.
Sure. Well, nice to be with you here in the main studio. Look, we've set out our tax changes to ensure that all of our policies in this election are fully funded and fully costed. That's the VAT loophole on private schools, private equity bonus payments, the windfall tax on the oil and gas majors, and the non-dom tax status changes. And the money that those will raise fully funds the policies that we're putting forward at this election.
But again, coming back to other people who look at this stuff from an independent perspective, not allied with any of the political parties, they're saying, look, somebody somewhere is going to have to get real and say, yes, if you're not going to put up taxes, how are you going to make ends meet? Because you are not going to be able to avoid either further borrowing or cutting further services. Even if it's not austerity, cuts are unavoidable. How do you answer that?
Yeah, look, we've made no kind of secret of the fact that if Labour wins the election this year, it will be the toughest fiscal inheritance that any party's had since the Second World War. It's going to be really, really tough. And the fact is, you don't get to see the books, actually, until you win the election. So we can only see so much from opposition. But the money we're going to raise, which I've already mentioned from those loopholes, is that kind of initial injection of cash into our public services. For example, 40,000 additional appointments in the NHS every week to help clear the backlog. But then we're going to have to do the hard yards in turning the country around. And our focus there is about how do you get the economy back on track and growing so you're generating more income for public services, which is why we were with so many business leaders today talking about that.
So what do you come to that in a minute, but what are you holding back then? I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it? You don't want to infantilise the voter. No. You don't want to pretend that things are better than they are. And you've just said how hard it's going to be. Mm-hmm. But where is all of that money going to come from? Because we're struggling to keep up now. If you listen to your party, you said that schools need more funding, the NHS needs more funding. Yep. These are huge sums of money.
Yeah, so the additional money for schools is from the closure of the VAT loophole on private schools, and then that money going into the state school system. It'll pay for 6,500 additional qualified teachers across the country in the state system, which we think is an important start. That's why we call it a first step. And the NHS, as I mentioned, the 40,000 additional appointments is funded through changes to the non-dom tax status.
You just mentioned this endorsement. 121 current and former business leaders have thrown their weight behind Labour's economic plans. Mm-hmm. But what's in it for the unions, the traditional voters who have bolstered Labour's coffers for many, many years? They'll be thinking, well, what's in it for employees, never mind the employers?
So look, Labour's a proud party that's pro-worker and pro-business. There's no point being pro-worker if there are no jobs to go to. You need private sector businesses to be able to do well in our country. And we have a whole set of measures in our Labour policy around supporting workers, for example, in precarious or vulnerable work, because we think that's important for workers, but also for the economy as well. And I don't think there's any problem in being pro-worker and pro-business. I'm a very proud trade unionist. I'm a trade union guy.
So you're not afraid to call yourself a socialist?
Oh, I don't know about that. I mean, all these labels today. I'm a member of the Labour Party and I'm Labour, and that's where I'm happy and very comfortable. But look, I'm happy to be a trade union guy, but also a pro-business guy, and that's where the Labour Party is today.
What about increasing productivity, closing the skills gap? Mm-hmm. How do you do that? Are we going to see changes to corporation tax? Are we going to see more of an apprenticeship levy? Where's the money coming from for that?
Sure. So we've been very clear on corporation tax for business that we're going to keep it at its current rate for the whole of the Parliament, because it's moved around a lot under successive Conservative chancellors, and that's difficult for businesses to make investment decisions. So that will be fixed over the course of a Labour government.
I want to ask you about, just quickly, about the Conservatives and this triple lock plus idea for pensions, whereby some pensioners will never have to pay income tax if the Conservatives get it in, because they'll lower the income tax threshold so they don't have to pay. That's going to be very appealing for people who are feeling the pinch. How do you push back against that?
Well, if anyone believes it, it might be appealing. I mean, it's completely
Why would they not?
Well, it's completely unfunded. The money the Tories said they were going to use to pay for this, they'd spent yesterday on the National Citizenship Survey. And who is it that's put up taxes so much on working people and pensioners over the last few years? Who's made it the thresholds come in so that pensioners are having to pay tax for the first time in a long time? It's the Conservatives. I wouldn't believe it, the paper that it's written on, quite frankly.
I have to ask you about Angela Rayner, who's been told today that there will be no police action over the sale of her council house. I mean, it's come at the beginning of the campaign. But what have you as a party learned about this episode?
Well, we've learnt that Conservative MPs are willing to waste police time. They did it with Keir Starmer.
What about how absolutely, scrupulously open about every single aspect of your life you're going to need to be, surely?
Sure, but Angela didn't do anything wrong. I mean, that's what was concluded today, so she had nothing to hide. This was Conservative MPs wasting police time to try to score political points, and quite frankly, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Darren Jones, good to have you here. Thank you very much for your time.